So, Mark, I'd like to talk to you in this topic about your book, An End to Upside Down Medicine, Contagion, Viruses, and Vaccines, and Why Consciousness is Needed for a New Paradigm of Health, which you published in 2023. Could you give us a brief overview of what that was about and why you wrote it, please?
The book challenges the allopathic approach to medicine, which is mainstream Western medicine, basically.
Yeah.
And I look at it from two different perspectives. I look at um, the spiritual component, that's actually the last half of the book, where mainstream medicine does not consider the human being to be a spiritual entity. It has a materialistic bias where everything is based on the physical world versus maybe other energies and forces or even soul level aspects that mainstream medicine just doesn't think about. And the other part of the book is looking at traditional perspectives on why people get sick. For example, the germ theory of disease, the idea that there are little microbes that make you sick, versus an alternative perspective that yes, those microbes exist. For example, we know that someone has a bacterial infection, quote unquote. We can see the bacteria there. The question is, did the bacteria cause that disease, or are the bacteria there because they're like firefighters putting out a fire? Yeah. In which case, the bacteria would be secondary to the underlying toxicity, physical or psychospiritual, that caused an issue that the bacteria need to clean up because they're uniquely capable of doing that. They're very different perspectives. And there's also an idea that I look at in the book around the notion of a virus, which is a specific entity theorized in the medical world. It's an intracellular parasite. It gets inside of a host cell in a body, it replicates, it bursts out, it goes into another cell, it continues to do this in an organism. It causes physical symptoms in that organism, and then it jumps from one organism to another and does the same thing. That sounds probably very obvious to your audience. What I didn't realize until researching for this book is that no one has ever seen what I just described. They have inferred parts of what I just described, but there is no study that exists that any doctor that I've talked to has found in which there is a truly independent variable of an isolated sample of just a virus by itself, where it can be introduced into a study where it does all those things that I described, infects the host cell, causes disease, and goes from one organism to another. So that was one of the big aha moments for me, that there might be new ways of thinking about why we get sick, because people do get sick and they can die from their symptoms. There's no doubt about that. The question is, what's the cause of it? We can see, for example, look outside and find wet grass, and we can say, oh, well, rain causes wet grass, therefore it must have rained. What about sprinklers or dew or children who ran by and poured buckets of water on the grass? When we observe something, especially in the field of epidemiology, that's looking at patterns of illness. Yes, there are patterns of illness, but why does it happen? And that's the reorientation of, okay, we see a symptom. What are all the reasons this might have happened?
Okay, well, that is interesting. That's certainly a direction that I know to be correct. So it's fair to say then, isn't it, that the body is inherently self-healing. It knows how to repair itself, and that the symptoms are actually the body's cleanup mechanism rather than an attack by something.
That is certainly a perspective out there, or that the body has adaptive mechanisms. It has ways of clearing what needs to be cleared. And we can even look at symptoms as ways of telling ourselves that perhaps we need to shift our direction spiritually, where it's giving us some insight into where we are in life, rather than just we have our life and then these symptoms come up and they're separate. Actually, the body could be informing us of something on a much higher level.
That's interesting. Have you ever found yourself in a personal health situation where your old materialistic programming instinctively resurfaced? And if so, how did you consciously override that to apply your new upside down model of healing?
Happens all the time now. When a symptom emerges, actually the first question I ask myself is, what has been going on in my life? There's a field called German New Medicine, which looks at this, of basically correlating types of conflicts. They're called conflict shocks in a person's life. These are events that are distressing, isolating, for example. They're very specific characteristics that cause the body to be in a state of conflict shock, and that can be correlated with a physical ailment. So I have found that to be true many times, that I will get sick sometimes after I've resolved the conflict, which is the body's way of flushing things out. And sometimes during a conflict.
Mm.
So in addition to, of course, wanting to look at nutrition and being aware of toxins and EMFs and things like that, I'm also looking at what are the conditions in my life? What's stressful? Are there things that I'm committing to that are causing problems in my life,
Yeah.
professionally, relationally, and so forth?
Yeah.
Looking at all those aspects of my life, and also trying to look at the things that might be uncomfortable to look at. That could be a challenge for all of us, or asking the question that we don't want to ask.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely accurate. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking actually you might really enjoy a podcast series I'm putting together with Matthew Zoltan, who's the creator of the Undo app, where he talks about how the body doesn't forget anything and how memory's stored in various areas of the body.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing. Well, I won't talk much about that here, but I'll send you the links when I've done it. It might be interesting for you. So if consciousness is primary, what do you think is the role of belief and emotion in healing?
If consciousness is primary, let's think about the implications. It's as if, as Bernardo Kastrup says, we live in an infinite stream of water, or water's like consciousness, and we are whirlpools within that stream. So we are individuals within a collective. But the whole stream is made of water, i.e., consciousness. Therefore, shifts in consciousness would inherently shift reality. It just seems to be a logical consequence. If all reality is consciousness, when consciousness shifts, reality must shift in some way, because what we experience as the material world is just a product of consciousness. Now, the way in which our beliefs and consciousness states can influence reality, and the mechanism behind it, that's much more of a question, because it might happen on levels that we don't understand or that we can't see. It could be nonlinear. But I would say that this view of consciousness would lead us to be much more careful about our thoughts and beliefs and intentions.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So could you maybe suggest a mental practice that a listener could adopt today to consciously support their own return to health? Maybe that questioning routine that you do, what's been going on in my life?
I think that's number one. If a
Yeah.
symptom comes up, to ask the question, what is going on in my life? Is there a stressful circumstance right now? And or did I just resolve something that my body is now flushing out and I can just relax? And actually the symptoms are part of a resolution, as some parts of German New Medicine would suggest.
Yeah.
And the other thing that comes to mind is Byron Katie's work, which deals with thinking about writing down a belief you have, just in a sentence, and asking very carefully, is this belief actually true? And can I know with certainty that this belief is true? And we'll find that actually we might be able to find exceptions to this belief that is causing so much stress, and to think about how we feel when we have that belief, and then what it feels like if we could let go of it, even given that it's not necessarily true.
Yeah. And also, what would my life be like if I'd never had this belief in the first place? That's another cool question as well, when I first believe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
cool. All right. So what would you say is the biggest mistake modern medicine could be making by missing this fundamental piece of the puzzle to do with consciousness?
I think it is missing often the root cause of illness. And that's one of the problems with mainstream medicine, is that it's not even considering the root cause. Or if it does, it says, well, that's an interesting theoretical exercise. They are typically worried about fixing a symptom, which is a very good thing in acute situations or emergencies. So I'm not saying it's all bad, but if it becomes the rule rather than the exception to the rule, which it has become, we end up in problems. So we're not thinking about the root cause enough, and therefore maybe we fix a symptom, but the root cause is still there and it could manifest in a new way.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Was it Miguel de Cervantes that said, take away the cause and the effect ceases? So the effect is always the symptom. So you say you can manage that to make it more comfortable. You can address critical problems with that, but you really want to spend your time focusing in on causality. Then the effect is no longer required.
Right.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
Nothing else. Thank you, Adrian.
Well, thank you, Mark.